We had just finished dinner and she seemed distant. I asked if everything was all right, expecting perhaps a minor complaint about work or something trivial. Instead, she paused, looked at me with a sharp intensity that made my stomach tighten, and said, "We need to talk." I remember every second of that moment, how her hands fidgeted with the hem of her shirt, the slight tremor in her voice, and the eerie silence that followed. My heart raced, bracing for the worst, but nothing could prepare me for what came next. "I've met someone," she began, each word cutting through the air. "He's the man of my dreams, and I'm moving in with him." First, I thought it was some kind of cruel joke. I even laughed, thinking she was just being sarcastic or testing some wild hypothetical. But her expression didn't shift. She wasn't joking. She meant every word. A surge of emotions overwhelmed me: disbelief, confusion, anger, and pain. My mind scrambled for answers. "What do you mean? Who is this guy? What about us?" Questions spilled out, but she seemed prepared, almost rehearsed. She told me how they had met at a mutual friends gathering, how their connection was instant, and how she had been holding back with me for years, waiting for something to change. But this man, she claimed, made her feel alive in ways I never had. Every word twisted the knife deeper. We had been married for 6 years. I thought we were happy, or at least stable. Sure, we had our ups and downs like any couple, but never did I think she was unhappy enough to do something like this. She kept explaining how she'd been planning this for weeks, how she had already packed some of her things, and how she was moving out by the weekend. The calmness in her voice was the hardest part. It was as if she had already left emotionally, and I was just the final obstacle on her way to this so-called dream life. I sat there, stunned and silent, trying to comprehend how everything had fallen apart so quickly without me noticing. And then came the final blow. "You'll always be a great person," she said, as if that could soften the pain, "but he's the one I've been waiting for." I couldn't even respond. My throat tightened and my chest felt heavy. She stood up, hesitated for a moment, then left the room. The sound of her footsteps retreating echoed in my ears like the final nail in the coffin of our marriage. That night I didn't sleep. I sat on the couch, replaying her words over and over, trying to make sense of it all. How could she betray me like this? How could she so casually tear apart everything we had built together? But the question that haunted me most wasn't why she chose him. It was how I hadn't seen it coming. The following days were a blur. True to her word, she started packing almost immediately. Watching her methodically fold clothes and box up belongings felt like watching my life disintegrate before my eyes. Each item she packed was another piece of me being torn away, leaving an empty shell where our marriage used to be. She wasn't cruel about it, at least not overtly. She tried to be civil, offering explanations I didn't ask for and reassurances I didn't want. "You'll move on too," she said at one point, as if that would make it all better. I didn't respond. What was there to say? Her actions had already spoken louder than any empty words she could offer. The house felt foreign once she left. It wasn't just the physical emptiness, though. The sight of her cleared-out closet and the half-empty bathroom shelves stung. It was the silence. It was suffocating. Every creak of the floorboards, every hum of the refrigerator seemed to amplify her absence. Nights were the hardest. Lying in our bed, now just mine, I stared at the ceiling for hours, wondering what I could have done differently. Was I too complacent? Too focused on work? Was there something broken in me that she had seen but never said aloud? Meanwhile, she seemed to be thriving in her new life. Social media became a cruel window into her world, one I couldn't look away from, no matter how much it hurt. Pictures of her with him, her so-called dream man, started appearing almost immediately. Smiling selfies at fancy restaurants, weekend getaways, captions about finally finding true happiness. It was like she wanted to rub it in to make sure I saw how much better her life was without me. I tried to avoid it, to block it out, but mutual friends made that impossible. They weren't unkind, but their pity was unmistakable. "She's moving so fast," one of them told me during a casual coffee meetup. I shook my head, trying not to sound too interested, but the question lingered in my mind. Then came the whispers. A friend, hesitant but clearly eager to share, dropped the first real hint that all was not as perfect as she had made it seem. "I ran into her last week," they said cautiously. She looked stressed. I didn't ask, but something seemed off. I shrugged it off in the moment, pretending it didn't matter to me, but deep down I couldn't help but wonder. Confirmation came from a source I didn't expect, her. One evening, out of nowhere, my phone buzzed with a message from her. It was brief and vague. "Hey, hope you're doing okay." I stared at it for what felt like an eternity, torn between ignoring it and demanding answers. In the end, I settled for a simple, polite response. "I'm fine. Hope you're well." What followed was a slow unraveling. She didn't outright admit her dream life was faltering, but the hints were undeniable. She complained about small things, arguments over trivial matters, tension about finances, and most notably, the realization that her dream man wasn't the perfect partner she had imagined. "He's not as patient as I thought," she confessed in one late-night message. "We've been arguing a lot. I guess I didn't see it before." Each revelation felt like both vindication and a fresh wound. Part of me wanted to feel triumphant, to say, "I told you so," even though I hadn't. But another part of me just felt sad, not for her, but for everything this represented. She had thrown away our life together for a fantasy, only to realize that reality didn't care about her illusions. More cracks started to show as she shared more details. She talked about how her dream man was becoming increasingly critical, how he didn't live up to the pedestal she had placed him on. He wasn't the attentive, caring partner she thought she was leaving me for. Instead, he was demanding, dismissive, and at times downright cruel. "I feel like I'm walking on eggshells," she admitted one night. Hearing this from her was surreal. The woman who had been so certain of her decision, who had left me without a second thought, was now grappling with the consequences of her choices. Yet, despite the sense of vindication, there was no joy in it for me. I wasn't the type to revel in someone else's misery, even if that someone had caused me immense pain. What stuck with me most was her tone, no longer confident, no longer smug. She sounded unsure, almost fragile, like someone realizing they had made a terrible mistake but didn't know how to fix it. While part of me wanted to ignore her entirely, to let her deal with the mess she had made, another part couldn't help but listen. After all, this was the woman I had loved, the woman I had vowed to spend my life with. Even though she had shattered those vows, a small part of me couldn't fully turn away from her pain. But I wasn't about to be her savior, not this time. She had made her bed, and now she was lying in it, no longer a dream but a reality she couldn't escape. After weeks of sporadic messages and veiled admissions of regret, the inevitable happened. She called me, not a text or a vague social media message, but an actual call. Seeing her name light up my screen sent a strange jolt through me. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. When I picked up, her voice, once so familiar, sounded strained, almost fragile. "I don't know who else to talk to," she began, skipping any pleasantries. Her tone was heavy with something I couldn't quite place, fear, guilt, maybe both. "Things have been harder than I expected," she continued. I stayed silent, letting her speak. If she wanted me to swoop in and console her, she was mistaken. Till I listened. She told me how her dream man wasn't just impatient and critical. He was controlling. He had started dictating where she could go, who she could see, even what she could post online. The perfect partner she had left me for had turned into a nightmare she hadn't seen coming. "It's like I'm trapped," she said, her voice trembling. Hearing her admit this was complicated. Part of me felt vindicated, like her misery was proof that I wasn't the problem all along. But another part of me felt a strange, unwelcome pang of concern. This was someone I had loved deeply, someone I had once envisioned a lifetime with. As much as I wanted to detach myself from her problems, it wasn't that simple. "What do you want me to do about it?" I finally asked, my voice sharper than I intended. I wasn't trying to be cruel, but I couldn't pretend her situation didn't stir up a mix of emotions in me: anger, pity, and a stubborn refusal to let her use me as her safety net. "I don't know," she admitted softly. "I just needed someone to talk to. Someone who might understand." Understand. That word hit me like a punch to the gut. How could she possibly think I would understand what she had done, walking away from everything we had built, chasing a fantasy, and leaving me to pick up the pieces of a life she had so carelessly destroyed? Still, I couldn't hang up. I listened as she recounted more details of her crumbling relationship. The fights had escalated, she said. The man who had once swept her off her feet now barely spoke to her without a tone of disdain. He made her feel small, unworthy, and completely powerless. "I don't even recognize him anymore," she whispered. The irony of her words wasn't lost on me. How often had I thought the same about her after she left? How often had I wondered where the woman I married had gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized? I didn't offer her sympathy. I didn't offer her advice. All I could muster was a cautious, neutral response. "You need to figure out what you want to do," I said. "No one can make that decision for you." She paused, as if expecting more, but I stayed silent. The truth was, I didn't have it in me to be her savior, not after what she'd done. Not after she had turned her back on me and everything we had shared. If she wanted help, she would have to find it elsewhere. Before she hung up, she said something that stuck with me. "I thought he was my dream," she murmured. "But now I'm not even sure what that means anymore." When the call ended, I sat there for a long time, staring at my phone. Part of me wanted to feel triumphant, like I had won some twisted battle, but there was no victory in this. No satisfaction to be found. All I felt was a strange, hollow mix of emotions, the kind that reminded me just how much her choices had changed both of our lives forever. After that phone call, I thought I'd heard the worst of it. But it turned out her nightmare was just beginning, and I was about to get a front row seat. It started subtly, almost like background noise, creeping closer. The more texts, more calls, each one more desperate than the last. Her carefully controlled world had unraveled, and now she was caught in a storm she couldn't escape. She called again a week later. This time, her voice was laced with panic. "He's not who I thought he was," she confessed. "I don't feel safe anymore." The word safe set off alarm bells in my head. I wasn't sure if she was exaggerating or if the situation was as bad as it sounded, but the urgency in her tone made it impossible to dismiss. She explained how his behavior had escalated from controlling to outright hostile. His temper, which she had brushed off as passion when they first met, had become unpredictable and volatile. Every small disagreement turned into a shouting match, and his anger often left her shaking, unsure of what he might do next. "He smashed a glass yesterday," she said, her voice trembling. "It wasn't aimed at me, but it felt like it could have been." I clenched my jaw, trying to process what she was telling me. Part of me wanted to yell at her for being so blind, for putting herself and me through all of this. But another part, the part that still held a shred of empathy, just felt drained. This wasn't the woman who had left me so confidently. This was someone scared, broken, and clearly regretting every choice she had made. As the days went on, her calls became more frequent, and her story became clearer and darker. He was gaslighting her, twisting her words, and making her question her own reality. She described how he would start arguments out of nowhere, accuse her of things she hadn't done, and then act like she was the problem. "I don't even know who I am anymore," she said during one particularly emotional call. "He makes me feel like I'm crazy, like I'm the one ruining everything." I struggled to maintain my distance emotionally, but it was hard to hear. I didn't love her anymore, not the way I once did, but it was painful to hear how far she had fallen. This wasn't the life she had envisioned when she walked away from me. It wasn't even close. She had left thinking she was upgrading, chasing a dream, only to find herself trapped in a waking nightmare. Then came the breaking point. Late one night she called me, and this time her voice was frantic, almost incoherent. "He locked me out," she cried. We had a fight and he threw my things outside. I have nowhere to go. I froze. A dozen thoughts raced through my mind. This wasn't my problem anymore. She had made her choice. She had walked out on me, on our marriage, on everything we had built together. But at the same time, how could I ignore her in that moment? As much as I wanted to detach, to tell her she was on her own, I couldn't bring myself to hang up. "What do you want me to do?" I asked, my voice cold but steady. "I don't know," she sobbed. I don't know where else to turn." Hearing her like that stirred something inside me, a mixture of anger, pity, and something else I couldn't quite define. She had destroyed me when she left, and now she was crawling back, expecting me to fix the mess she had made. But I wasn't the same person I was when she walked out the door. I had learned to survive without her, to rebuild what she had broken. Still, in that moment, it was hard to ignore the raw desperation in her voice. She stayed on the line, crying softly as I sat there in silence. It was a moment of clarity for me, a reminder of how far we had drifted from the life we once shared. She was no longer the woman I had loved, and I was no longer the man willing to sacrifice everything for her. Her dream had become a nightmare, and now, for the first time, she was realizing what she had lost. 2 days after that frantic call, she showed up at my door. It was late in the evening, and I had barely finished cleaning up after dinner when I heard a knock. I wasn't expecting anyone, so when I opened the door and saw her standing there, clutching a small suitcase, I froze. She looked exhausted, like someone who had been running on fumes for weeks. Her makeup was smudged, her hair disheveled, and her eyes were red from crying. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I stepped aside without saying a word, unsure if it was the right decision but unable to leave her standing out there. She walked in, dropped her suitcase near the couch, and stood there awkwardly, as if unsure of her place in the home she had once shared with me. The silence was heavy, but I didn't rush to fill it. I wanted her to speak first. I wanted to know why she was really here. Finally, she sat down, her shoulders slumping, as though the weight of everything she had been carrying was finally too much. "I made a mistake," she said, her voice cracking. "I thought I was chasing happiness, but all I did was destroy the only real happiness I ever had." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment I wasn't sure how to respond. Part of me wanted to lash out, to remind her of the pain she had caused me, to make her feel even a fraction of what I had felt when she left. But another part of me, the part that still remembered the good times, couldn't bring itself to kick her when she was already down. "What do you want from me?" I finally asked, keeping my tone as steady as I could. I needed clarity, and I wasn't about to let her waltz back into my life without explaining herself. "I don't know," she admitted, tears welling up in her eyes. I needed to see you, to tell you that I'm sorry, that I regret everything." She went on to recount the full extent of what had happened with her dream man, the fights, the manipulation, the control. It had all spiraled into something she couldn't escape. He had become emotionally abusive, and by the end, even the illusion of love was gone. She felt broken, lost, and ashamed of the choices she had made. Listening to her was surreal. This was the same woman who had once confidently declared she was moving on to something better. Now she sat in front of me, a shadow of herself, admitting that her dream had been a lie. When she was done, she looked at me, her eyes searching mine for something, understanding, forgiveness, maybe even a chance at redemption. "I don't expect you to take me back," she said quietly. I didn't know where else to go." Her words hit me hard. I could see the sincerity in her face, the raw vulnerability she rarely let show. But I wasn't the man she had left behind. Her apology didn't erase the pain she had caused or the trust she had shattered. "I've spent months trying to put myself back together," I told her. "You didn't just leave, you destroyed everything I thought I knew about us, about myself. And now you're here asking me to what? Forget all of that? Pretend it never happened?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I'm not asking you to forget. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I was wrong, that I see now what I gave up. I took a deep breath, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to tell her things would be okay. But another part, the part that had learned to stand on its own, knew I couldn't go back. Not to what we were, and certainly not to what she wanted now. I appreciate your honesty, I said finally, my voice firm but not unkind. But I've moved on. I've had to. You made your choice, and now I'm making mine. Her face crumpled at my words, but she nodded slowly, as if she had expected this. She stayed a little longer, long enough for us to talk through some of the lingering wounds. By the time she left, there was a sense of closure, not the kind that tied everything up neatly, but the kind that made it clear we were done. As I closed the door behind her, I felt a strange mix of emotions, relief, sadness, and a hint of freedom. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could truly move forward. Not because she had come back, but because I had finally let her go.